From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Defying the odds after experts predicted the 2020 census results would almost certainly mean Rhode Island would lose a congressional seat, the announcement this week revealed otherwise. The Ocean State held on to its 2 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and avoiding a potential political showdown between Congressman David Cicilline and Jim Langevin in 2022. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi, and joining us in studio to talk about the census and much more is Congressman Jim Langevin. Congressman, good to see you in studio again. It's been a long time.
Great to see you in person in studio as well.
So as I said off the top there, for a while now, experts who track the census data predicted that Rhode Island would lose a House seat. We learned, of course, this week that that was not the case, but it must have surprised even you.
Sure, it was a pleasant surprise for all of us, for sure. But I had been saying right straight through that we really don't know, what's going to happen until all the numbers are counted, not only from Rhode Island, but from every state and every congressional district in the country. And it really could have gone either way. That had been my message all the way through. So I give a lot of credit to former Governor Gina Raimondo and the Complete Count Commission, James Diosa, Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, who co-chaired that, and all the members of the commission and the census takers for making sure that Rhode Island got a robust count. Obviously, it made a big difference.
For a long time, reporters like Ted and I would pester you about this topic, and you constantly deflected the question about the census and what you would do if Rhode Island went down to 1 seat. But now that the decision is out, the dust is settled, can you admit now, at least, that you were contemplating what you would do if Rhode Island lost a seat?
Sure. I mean, there was a number of options that I would have weighed, but I have enjoyed serving the people of Rhode Island and representing the 2nd Congressional District, and that was my intention to keep focusing on doing the job.
What were those options, Congressman?
My main focus was doing the job at hand. I wasn't focused on the election of 2022. That was something that would have happened down the road. But my job had always been, my primary focus had been doing the job, representing the people. So,
let me ask you, so I looked it up last night, and so the 2 seats definitely now will exist through the 2030 election at least. If you continue to run and win, which you've already done for 20 years, so there's reason to think you might be able to do that, you would overtake Freddie St. Germain as the all-time longest-serving Rhode Island congressman. I think if you were to run and win in 2030. Now I know when I ask you things about how long you'd stay, you always say, "Oh no, only one election," and the people. If the people of the 2nd District would keep you, could you see yourself, running for another decade if you continue to have their support?
Another decade is a little far out to predict. So I've always said I'd like to stay as long as the people of Rhode Island would like to have me and would like me to continue to serve. Whether it would be, for another decade, whether I will do that or people would want me to do that, a lot of it's going to be up to the voters. But right now, there's a lot of work to do. Right now, job one is helping the people of Rhode Island get through this pandemic. We have 2 primary goals, which is to crush the virus and keep our economy intact, help people keep their heads above water, especially those in the most vulnerable populations, and making sure that our small businesses get the help that they need so that they keep their doors open, keep their workforce intact. It's a daunting task right now, but I've been laser focused on that, and that's what I'm going to continue to focus on.
And we are going to talk a bunch about policy, but just to wrap up some of the politics questions I had for you. Your district, the 2nd District, which for people, if they're picturing a map, it's the western part of Rhode Island, has trended a bit more toward the Republicans. It's always been a bit more conservative, not quite as liberal as the 1st District that Cicilline represents. And I was wondering, you've represented it now for 20 years. Have you noticed a shift in the 2nd District? Has it been, a bit of a trend toward the Republicans or a bit more conservatism among the folks you represent, as we do seem to see in the election results?
Yeah, there's no doubt, certainly after the previous redistricting, that my district has been more conservative. It has definitely tended to be more toward more red than blue, so to speak. They say it's about a D+5 district, which means leaning Democrat plus plus 5 points district, where the other district is about a D plus 15.
Yeah, double digits, right?
So, yeah. So it definitely has become more conservative. But look, this is all about trying to always govern from the center, as far as I'm concerned anyway. To get all the big things done, you really need bipartisan focus and effort. I pride myself on being one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. I'm always working with a Republican colleague on the major issues that I'm working on. I believe that we all work hard enough, we can try to find common ground. So on career and technical education, which I co-chair that caucus with my good friend, Republican G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. On cybersecurity, I'm working with Mike Gallagher, who I serve on the House Armed Services Committee with, and Mike McCall, also on cybersecurity. So all of the major things that I'm focusing on, I take a bipartisan approach anyway. So I can govern from the center, and I pride myself on that.
Real quick, Ted was asking you about the 2032 election. Just
2030,
check, 2030, sorry. Just want to check off the box. Are you running again in 2022?
I am planning to run for re-election in 2022.
And just back to the census briefly here, my final question anyway. Did you get a call from Secretary Raimondo, who oversees the census, about the news?
No, I did not.
How did you learn about it?
Like everybody else. I was in my office, we were watching, we had the laptop up, and it was live streaming. And first, Secretary Raimondo came on and gave her a monologue, and then turned it over to the director of the Census Bureau. And
so you don't get any, the members of Congress don't get any heads up beyond the public?
No, I'm sure there were probably strong ethics rules and
there's a joke in there somewhere, but have you talked to Secretary Raimondo since she's taken office?
I have not had the opportunity to talk to her yet, but she called me just prior to it becoming public that she was going to be nominated officially, and we spoke then at length, and we talked about how we could continue to work together. I brought up career technical education, job training as something that's a primary focus of mine, and I hope to continue to work together with her on that. Where cybersecurity is something that I have been a leader on in the Congress. I also brought up a provision that I'm championing, which is called creating the Bureau of Cyber Statistics. It sounds a little wonky, but the bottom line is we don't have a lot of great metrics about what tools and what things really work in cybersecurity, which don't. We've got to, in order to really get our arms around how to better protect the country in cyberspace, we need that data, and it would be created under the Department of Commerce if we can get the legislation enacted to law.
Let's stick with cybersecurity, because I was interested. Anyone who's followed your career knows how much attention you've paid to that issue, and it was interesting to me when frankly, usually when it's a Democratic president, I get statements from all of you that I cover who are Democrats, and you all say this speech was perfect. I love this president. Everything's great. And you had a little bit of criticism in your response to President Biden's speech this week. You said you talked about all the things you liked, but then you said you were disappointed that he didn't talk about cybersecurity more as part of infrastructure. And it does seem like, for all the time you and others have put into this issue, it still sometimes doesn't quite hit that top tier of issues. Why do you think that is? And are you concerned that the president and his team still aren't quite seeing it as important as you do?
Well, I do believe that President Biden and his team do see cybersecurity as one of the top national security challenges that we face. And in fact, he's taken several positive steps forward to strengthen cybersecurity. We had a big win in the last Congress right up to the end. For more than a decade, I've been trying to create the National Cyber Director position, which is a Senate-confirmed position. We finally had that happen. It's probably the biggest thing that I've done in my more than 20 years in Congress. I created a whole department, basically, in the Executive Office of the President, that is going to help better protect the country in cyberspace against attacks of significant consequence. A couple of years ago, we created in the National Defense Authorization Act the Cyber Solarium Commission. It's a national commission that was charged with creating an overall arching strategy to better protect the country in cyberspace. President Biden just appointed the first ever nominated the first ever National Cyber Director, Chris Inglis, former Deputy Director.
And yet, for all that you're saying, you said yourself you were disappointed after the speech.
And I was disappointed. In the speech, he mentioned cyber a few times in there, and I was like, okay, I'm hoping that we're going to hear more. And I didn't hear that substance that there was a more robust plan and spending time on how we're going to better protect the country in cyberspace. But I believe the president and his team get it. They've taken some positive steps forward. They appointed Ann Neuberger as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber. First time that position has existed, and their Department of Homeland Security is being beefed up. There was just about $600 million that's appropriated for CISA.
Let me just ask you very quickly before we move on. You know, for the viewer at home who thinks cybersecurity, it sounds distant to them and everything. 30 seconds. Why should the average Rhode Islander sitting at home watching Newsmakers today care about this?
Because we all use the internet every day. We all put our, we have our personal and private information that we need to be concerned about, whether you're using it for banking or communications, commerce. We all, in some way or another, probably using the internet or the cyber-related things every day. And if there was a major cyber attack or your personal private information is compromised, it can affect your credit. You're going to have money stolen through cyber attacks and taking money out of your bank accounts. It just permeates our life in so many ways, and it's a huge vulnerability. And we're not where I want us to be in terms of being secure. We're getting there, and I've been fighting hard. We had 27 provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act that came out of the Cyber Solarium Commission that I was a member of that were enacted into law that's going to keep us safer, including, by the way, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency being able to do threat hunting on government networks. They didn't have that authority before. Now they do.
Front and center in President Biden's speech on Wednesday was his $2 trillion infrastructure plan. We are now past $6 trillion in Biden's spending proposals since he took office. We're talking just 3 months. Is there no limit to the spending out of Washington right now?
Well, again, as I said earlier in the show, our job right now is job one is getting everyone through this pandemic. And we have to do it in two ways. We have to crush the virus, and we need to make sure that we keep our economy intact so when we come out of this and the public health officials give us the green light that we can reopen our economy, that it's not in shambles, right? That we keep people's heads above water, we keep small businesses, that their doors open, their workforce intact. So spending money, deficit spending rate, unfortunately right now it's absolutely necessary for us to complete those two goals and meet that mission. And eventually we will obviously have to, this money is going to have to be paid back.
Paid back, it's a big bill.
But right now we have to do the tough work of investing in America. And that's why the American Rescue Plan was so important, helping to, again, provide money for vaccines and testing and antivirals, but also putting money in people's pockets and so they can put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads. And
one way the president wants to pay it back, and before we go to break, is to have higher taxes on corporations for the infrastructure bill. Do you support that?
So I definitely think that we should rebalance the corporate tax rate. I want to make sure that our businesses stay competitive. I was just speaking with our East Greenwich Chamber of Commerce and other business people, and they're concerned about the rate going too high. I don't want to see us be anti-competitive with in terms of the international front. But certainly, I think a higher corporate tax rate is appropriate. For small businesses, it was brought to my attention, and I think it's a good idea. Could we have a graduated rate for smaller businesses? Now, many of those are S Corp versus C Corp, so they would pay it as ordinary income. But for those smaller businesses that might be a C Corp, if maybe it's not as high as 28% as what the president has proposed, maybe it's a little bit lower, but we want to do something to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share. Companies like Amazon should not,
including those who make more than $400,000 a year, raising the income tax on those.
I'm looking at that right now. What is the right level? But yeah, I support President Biden's mission and his proposal that no one below the $400,000 is going to be paying a dime in additional income tax. So we're going to protect the middle class, grow the middle class, especially those people that are on the lower end of the income scale, making sure that they can earn a living wage. I support a $15 an hour minimum wage. Nobody should be working a 40-hour work week and living in poverty. So, how we get there, quickly we get there, is to be debated. But I think everybody recognizes that a higher minimum wage is going to be a great thing for the middle class.
We're going to take a break here on Newsmakers. Our guest, obviously, is Congressman Jim Langevin. When we come back, the crisis at the southern border. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Congressman Jim Langevin. Congressman, what's going on at the southern border right now is a humanitarian crisis. Both sides can agree on that. Do you feel like the Biden administration was unprepared for this?
Well, one of the things is that there wasn't a lot of cooperation between the previous administration and the incoming Biden administration. So they were really caught behind, the 8 ball, if you will, and trying to get everything going as soon as they came into office, not having the benefit.
But how does that relationship affect the number of people that are coming to the southern border now that Biden has taken office?
I'm sorry, what do you
well, what you're suggesting is the Trump administration didn't cooperate with the Biden administration, which is why we have what we have going on down there. Is that your answer?
Well, in terms of preparation for how you're going to deal with the issues at the border, for example, the number of detention beds and facilities, the incoming Biden administration didn't have official notice of what they had to deal with and work with. And certainly there's the policy now that we're not going to be turning away children at the border, and I think it's a terrible situation that you have parents that are so desperate in countries from South or Central America sending their unaccompanied children to the border. I can't imagine any parent being so desperate that they would send their children unaccompanied to America, hoping for a better life and safety. I would hope that people would come to America the right way and through proper channels and follow the immigration laws of our country. We need to work to find out what the ongoing issues are in Central and South American countries, so that whether it's the corruption down there or it's just abject poverty, we can work with those countries so that people aren't going to be leaving their own country and coming to the border. But it is a serious situation at the border. It's no doubt we need to have balance, both security and compassion, and I know that's what the Biden administration is trying to do.
You mentioned you spoke to the East Greenwich Chamber recently, and I have to imagine, maybe it didn't, but I would think that the unemployment insurance bonus provision came up. We're hearing about that a lot from businesses who argue that, especially restaurants and seasonal businesses, that they're having trouble attracting workers because in the end the workers do better with the unemployment bonus than they do working. Now, we also hear from people who say, hey, it's still a pandemic and people may not be vaccinated and may be scared to go back to that kind of front-facing work. But do you have, in retrospect, do you have any concerns about how that was structured, and you worried about the effect on the seasonal businesses in your district?
Well, I certainly have heard those stories, and it would concern me if that was a disincentive for people going back to work. But I really do believe that the overwhelming majority of people want to go back to work. And we all want our lives back, right? And that's why it's so important to get us through this pandemic. And when public health officials say that we give us the all clear that we can open back up, in the meantime, we do have to help people to keep food on their table and roof over their heads, and that's what the extra stimulus money was for those that are unemployed through no fault of their own, but for the pandemic. But if people can go back to work, if there's a job that they can safely go back to, and things can reopen, they should go. People need to go back to work clearly, and if a job is offered and if they don't take it, it's illegal not to go back to work and not to. You can't keep staying on unemployment.
Some people have suggested converting it into a bonus that you can keep even if you do go back to work, to take the job but not have to give up the $300. Do you think Congress should consider that?
Yeah, I think we should look at those types of options, and I've heard some of my Republican colleagues who have also offered those types of alternatives, as well as some Democrats have talked about that. And I think we can certainly get creative. That's an area that's ripe for bipartisanship, to trying to figure out a way, what's the right balance, so that if in fact there's a disincentive for people going back to work because of the extra money, we need to address that. We want to make sure that businesses can keep their employees together, that they can staff their businesses and they can conduct commerce so that we can keep our economy again intact and strong.
Congressman, all signs are pointing toward Rhode Island legalizing recreational marijuana. Do you support the state doing so?
So I'm still looking at that issue. I have certainly support the issue of medical use of marijuana, but I think it's inevitable at some point that recreational marijuana will probably be approved. We're still, different states are going through that process right now of legalizing marijuana.
What gives you pause, Congressman?
Well, I'm always concerned about the public health issues and the fact that law enforcement, it's difficult to know when someone is under the influence and such. But I think it's eventually will get approved, and so it's something that I think it's going to happen at some point.
And final question on this: there's always talk of federal legalization, which is what you'd have direct influence on. Right. Would you support or oppose that, or is it sort of the same answer? You're still looking at it.
Sure. I would certainly look at the bill and how it would impact my constituents and how it impacts the state as a whole. But at this point, it's something that I would probably lean towards supporting, and I certainly don't want it to obviously abuse, but I had evolved on the topic over a while in terms of medical use of marijuana. That is something that it took me a while to get there, but I eventually did. What I do want to make sure that it happens, that if a state approves it, then I certainly don't want the federal government coming down and punishing our residents.
Cracking down.
So I've supported decriminalizing it. I think that's an important step, because right now it's a Schedule I drug, and right now we're not able to do research on marijuana to the degree that we probably should be done because of that. So that's something that Congress has voted on before, and I supported the issue of decriminalizing it, because I want to make sure that we can do the research, use the federal dollars to make sure that we can get the answers to the medical issues that how people are affected by use of marijuana.
For years, you were described as one of the last pro-life Democrats in Congress. Do you still consider yourself pro-life today?
I do, but I know it's a complicated topic. I come to this position because of my own life experience. That as a teenager, I almost lost my own life in the shooting accident that I was involved with that left me paralyzed. And my life hung by a thread, and I got my second chance. And I would always feel like a hypocrite if I deprived somebody else of their second chance at life. And so I've always approached the topic from how can we find common ground, and we find that through trying to reduce unwanted pregnancies and unintended pregnancies. So I've supported family planning and use of contraception, sex education, all those things that we can do to try to reduce drastically the number of unintended, unwanted pregnancies. If we can do that, then we will have made a great progress in reducing the number of abortions.
We've seen enormous pressure on Democrats who have historically been either pro-life or more moderated on abortion. You saw President Biden flipped on the Hyden Amendment after decades of having a different position. Is that something you felt in Congress, that there's less and less room for Democrats who aren't, full-throated for abortion rights?
Sure. The party is primarily a pro-choice party, and I've seen that change in terms of the number of members of Congress that hold a pro-life position on the Democratic side. But I've always been able to work again across the aisle to try to find that common ground, just as I've worked with my Democratic colleagues and in supporting things like family planning and contraception and sex education, so that we find ways to reduce unwanted pregnancies. It's a win-win all the way around. And I also have obviously tremendous respect for women's health and women's decisions, and that's another thing that I'm always weighing when I approach these these decisions on the abortion issue.
We have less than a minute left, Congressman. Liberal congressional Democrats have proposed expanding the number of Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13, a move Republicans call court packing. Do you support or oppose it?
I would be very reluctant to support expanding the court. That's a real step forward. Something I think President Biden, I think, is taking the right step and approach in studying the issue, and he put a commission together. So, but I would say tread very carefully there before you talk about expanding the Supreme Court.
10 seconds.
I wish we had a more balanced court. I don't like the way President Trump pushed through conservative justice, and Merrick Garland never got the vote that he should have.
Okay, Congressman, we have to go. Thank you for watching. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.